My colleague Ronnie to start us off with a karakia, and then we'll introduce the webinar today.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Te karakia tīmatanga tēnei. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana. Hei huarahi mā tātou i te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou ia tātou katoa. Kia ora.
Kia ora again. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Sakhar. I'm the Kai Whakahare Kopapa for Huye, just like Rania, one of the project managers. Thank you for joining us. Today we'll hear from Kristen from Access Radio and Alana from the Gift Collective, two great organizations that have helped the community in different ways, and we'll explore that all. But before we start, please, during the webinar, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'll collate them and we'll ask them at the end in a conversational style so that you will get to hear all of this. We're also recording the webinar and we'll be sharing it with you tomorrow. We'll include any slides that have been shared today in the email that we send, and we'll also have a survey that will come at the end with just some questions about any other topics that you'd want to hear from us in the future, or just general feedback about the webinars. Yes, so today we've got the Gift Collective and Access Radio is acting as an umbrella organization. We'll hear from them about that. We'll start the webinar by hearing from Alana first from the Gift Collective, and then we'll go into hearing from Kristen, and then we'll allocate some time for questions and answers. Webinar is going to end at 1 p.m., but we always have a space for 30 minutes that's open afterwards, just for everyone here to get to meet each other, share about how they've been doing, especially in these recent times, but also ask us any questions to Huye or anyone around us, some things they want clarifications on, or if they need any support that we might be able to help with. So without any further ado, please, Alana, tell us about the Gift Collective.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for having me today. Thanks to Huye for organizing this and to everyone for coming. Yeah, as Sakhar said, I'm Alana from the Gift Collective, and I'm here to talk about fund holding. And fund holding is where an entity, an organization holds funds or receives grants on behalf of a project that isn't set up for that on their own. Maybe they don't have a legal entity or they don't have charity status. And it's just a way to kind of share the infrastructure of a legal entity so that everybody doesn't have to make their own. So I will explain how it works. Let me share my screen. All right, is that working? Cool. All right, so this is our website talking about fund holding. So basically, yeah, an instant home for your project that you don't need to incorporate an entity or register a charity or set up a bank account or hire an accountant and all that stuff. You can just sign up with us instead. And it just explains how it works. And it comes with a really cool online platform that I'll show you some examples of in a moment that helps you to raise money, thank your supporters, communicate with your community, and basically transparently show your finances to your community. Yeah, so we offer two options. There's the non-charity side, which I won't talk about today, and the Gift Collective, which is what I'm here to talk about today, which is charity fund holding, and it's under the umbrella of the Gift Trust, which is a registered charitable trust that has been established for more than a decade and holds millions of dollars and sort of has a lot of that credibility and the infrastructure you need to set funders' minds at ease and to provide this service for projects. So the Gift Collective, yeah, it's the basic pitch is you don't have to start your own charity. You can sign up with us instead. And it's really for any project that maybe it's a new project or the people who are doing it just don't have time or the capacity to run their own charity. Or you don't want to be spending time doing bureaucracy and filling out paperwork and worrying about charities reporting and all this stuff. So basically you can leave all that to us and just really focus on the kaupapa, on your community, on what you're really there to do. Because most people who do wonderful, beautiful things in their community don't get into that work for the paperwork. They get into it to really make a difference for people. So we're trying to save them time and take some of that off their plate. And this explains a little bit more details. We've got some really cool quotes recently out here from funders just about how much easier it makes it for them to make grants to projects which are less formal if they are under the umbrella of the Gift Collective. And we've seen that in practice. I'll show you some examples of grants that have been made, but institutional grant funders, so that's like government grantors or community trusts or established institutional foundations, they really can't just give money to a kind of loose community group. They have to interact with a formal legal entity that can give them the paperwork that they need and tick off their boxes in order to release that funding. But a lot of these funders they want to reach further into communities, and they know that not everybody has a registered charity. So we've had some really good feedback from funders about this. I'll show you, so these are the projects so far that have signed up. So Gift Collective is a relatively new initiative. It's been kind of going for about a year and just sort of slowly growing. So we've got 20 projects now, and I'll show you some examples. But the cool thing about the platform that we use, so the software platform, which is called Open Collective, it just makes it all really transparent. So this is the same view that you will see if you come to this page. You can see all the projects that we host, and you can click on any one of these and look in detail on what they're up to and their budgets and everything like that. So if you sign up as a project with Gift Collective, you get a page that looks like this. So this is Tiwai Waka, which is the Kaupapa Māori group doing really cool work in Matauranga Māori and like herbal medicine and really interesting stuff. And they do a lot of education work. So they get this page like this, and they can set it up and describe who they are, receive donations so people can make payments through bank transfer, credit card, and all of that's built into the platform. They can show their supporters. So these are the people who have people and organizations who have granted them. And then they can also show their budget, and I'll just show you. So this is visible to everyone basically. And you can see, oh, where's the money going? What is this group up to? And this is really handy for funders because it's kind of like automated reporting that sort of writes itself. But it's also really great for just the community to really understand where their donations are going and understand what a group is up to. Here's another example. Te Uiwi Tautoko is an education program giving people skills to fight anti-Māori racism, especially online. And so there's a course, and there are workshops and stuff like that. So they're receiving money here under Gift Collective's umbrella. And you can see the grants that they've got. They've got a few grants recently. And they are able to do things like, tell their story, and then also here's their budget and updates. So if you post an update, it's like a blog on your page, and it also goes out as an email to all of your supporters. And it's a really great way to do community engagement, really say what's going on with the project, and you can embed multimedia and all that stuff. So the platform itself just gives you a lot of infrastructure that otherwise as a project, you'd have to go build your own website, and not everyone knows how to do that and all that kind of stuff. Some other quick examples. Whakapuna Believe is just a really cool art exhibition project, people with experience of addiction making art about their experiences, and they've been given a grant by DIA Lottery Grants and Whanganui Community Trust. And so I just thought this was cool because it means that the kind of really traditional funders are up for funding in this sort of new or more unusual way through a fund holder. Another example of that is this is Aotearoa Refugee and Migrant Support Services, and they've received a sizable grant from Wellington Community Foundation. Happen Films is another really cool one. They make documentary films about social impact projects, and they are funding for all of their different films here on their page. So you can see all these different projects represent different films that they're working on, and people can give them grants or do crowdfunding donations to support their work. And this is one that has already been fully funded, which is about Common Unity Project in Lower Hutt, which is a really cool project that some of you might be aware of, but they've been able to fund this film through this process and make this really cool story. And just to give you an idea, there's this wider global network through the Open Collective platform of other entities in other countries doing a similar thing. So Open Collective Foundation is a similar organization, but in the United States, and they're hosting 345 different projects, lots of mutual aid groups and social justice movements and food distribution and all kinds of community projects. Here's another one. This is All for Climate. They host climate action groups in Europe. So lots of chapters of Fridays for Future and Extinction Rebellion and stuff like that. But I just wanted to show that, to show kind of if Gift Collective grew here in Aotearoa, what it could look like in the future, and how exciting. I think it would be very exciting to have like hundreds of projects earning money through this platform and being able to do just really awesome stuff in the community. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a pretty good overview. I'm happy to answer questions. And we've also got here on the call today, Cheryl from the Gift Trust, who's our partner in this. So if there's any secure questions about the charity stuff, she's an absolute expert on that side of it. And yeah, glad to have her here. So back to you, Sahir.
Thank you, Lana. I'm sure everyone will have a few questions because I know I do too. Well, just please type them up and I will collate them and we'll ask them towards the end. But for now, Kristen, please tell us about Access Radio and your experience as an umbrella organization.
Kia ora, thank you so much for having me. Can I share my screen here to see if that works? There we go. Share. Kia ora. So my name is Kristen Patterson. I'm the station manager at Wellington Access Radio. So we are an incorporated society and a registered charity, which means that we're able to apply for lots of different kinds of grant funding. Now, what we do as an entity is we provide a platform of representation for communities which are not traditionally covered in mainstream media, but absolutely deserve a seat at the table and to have their voices heard. So often these community groups are small and low on resource. They may not be incorporated. They may not have charitable status. And as a result of that, it's really hard for them to get funding. So what we have done in the past is step in to get the funding specifically for those organisations. So one that I wanted to have a chat with you about today is the absolutely wonderful Voice of Aotearoa, who you may be familiar with. There are a group of refugee background community Kiwis. They've also worked a lot with Host International, and they make a program in the English language, although we do broadcast in 22 languages here, but theirs is in English. And it's basically represents the voice of a variety of their communities and their perspectives, and they also cover things like current events. But like many community groups, they don't necessarily have the capacity to do a huge amount because this is, of course, on top of education, on top of work, on top of other volunteering. So we thought it would be a great idea for them to get some funding to create their program, to contribute towards their team. So we worked with them to apply for a grant from ethnic communities. And what it covered, it was quite a few different things. So it covered travel, parking, koha, some food, different kind of administrative bits and pieces, some training, and some equipment. And it just allowed them to build their capacity and create their program in a way that wasn't super stressful. And yeah, so we applied to ethnic communities and we were very successful in getting that funding. And it was for their last season of their show that they did, which was absolutely fantastic. It's available online and podcast if you'd like to have a listen. And yeah, the other thing that was really great about being an umbrella organization applying for this, it wasn't just for them to work on their show with us, it was for their entire collective to build capacity. And as a result of having extra resource, they've gone on to do some phenomenal things over the last couple of years. For example, they were heavily involved in the planning of World Refugee Day, which was up at the Calvin Hub up at Vic Uni last year, which was just a phenomenal event. But what we want to do now as an umbrella organisation with them is to apply for quite a bit more money. So it's my belief that people shouldn't always have to volunteer to get what they need out of life. They should also get some kind of compensation. So we're going to work with them this year to apply for quite a bit more money. And this is where they and we thought it could get slightly tricky as the umbrella organisation, but it turns out it really wasn't. If we get project funding, we can just assign it all to them. They can pay staff as contractors. And then the only burden on us really at the end of that is in the resolution to provide all the receipts, GST numbers, so on and so forth. We don't need to add them to our HR or to our payroll. So it's a relatively painless process. And yeah, so that's our ambition for the next year. And it won't just be for what they're doing with us. It will be to, again, increase their capacity across all of their activities. And that's something that we're incredibly happy to do because we really believe in community building. So as an umbrella organisation, traditionally, we would usually just apply for funding to cover the airtime fee for a radio program. But in this case, we wanted to apply for more funding to empower them as a whole collective, and it does align with all of our goals and aims as an organisation. So it was a really good, clear fit for us to all work together, and potentially they will look towards becoming their own organisation in the future, and then use the track record they've had through our funding to sort of support them into the next stage. But yeah, so in terms of people using us as an umbrella organisation, or what we would personally wish to consider, it's that first and foremost, it's not going to clash with funding that we are going to apply for operationally, because there are, we go for lotteries, we go for community organisation grant scheme, Wellington City Council, arts and culture, and social and recreation. So there's quite a few different ones. So we need to always have a balance of ensuring that we're getting the funding that we need versus just applying on behalf of other community groups, and try to kind of spread the pie across and not favour one group too much and let others miss out. But there are so many different grants out there that we can actually, as an umbrella organisation, apply for quite a lot and try to kind of equip quite a few groups. And again, without that really affecting our bottom line, because it is zoned off as project funding. It doesn't suddenly make it look like we're a super rich charity or anything, which is really good. Yeah, and so if someone was to approach us for grant funding, one of the main issues we've had in the past is groups just saying, we lack capacity, we need money. But unfortunately, there aren't many grants that, just have some cash to do what you want to do. It has to really be aligned with a project or an objective or something that you want to achieve, some kind of impact that you want to have. And it needs to be really clearly outlined. And then that needs to be matched with a grant where those outcomes are going to fit properly. And that can be slightly time consuming to work with some groups who want us to be an umbrella organisation, because if they haven't gone away and done that thinking and done that research, that's quite time consuming for us. Luckily, we know quite a lot, so we're able to kind of point them in the right direction a lot of times. But the part that we would really take is helping them align what they want to do with the grant. We then submit it, but we try to be relatively hands-off in execution, because we want the groups, we very much by, for and about the community. It's not me as the station manager dictating what happens, it's the groups choosing themselves how to do things. So we try to be quite hands-off, but then be really rigorous around documentation, so that when we do the grant resolution, we're able to report back everything that was achieved. And yeah, that's again goes back to being able to clearly articulate what a group actually wants to do with the grant funding that they're going to receive. And yeah, if you look on the, I don't know who here has the Community Matters login with the Real Me, there's a few questions that they ask for nearly every grant. It doesn't matter which grant it is or what the outcomes are. There's kind of really specific questions that you have to mold the application into. And one of the big ones is how you can measure an outcome. And that can be really tricky, because we're talking about a lot of, I suppose you could say, soft societal outcomes in the field that I work in. They're not sort of very measurable necessarily, but being able to angle a project to be able to gather some sort of data on how you've made an impact or how you've made a change. And that can help really align your thinking in writing your application and in the success in getting it. So yeah, what I would say to anyone out there who is looking to partner with an umbrella organisation is to pitch to them. So contact them first, but have a really clear pitch and a really clear list of what you will be responsible for doing, and also what your expectations are going to be on the organisation, because organisations often might say no if they think it's going to look a bit unwieldy and they think it hasn't been planned properly. It's going to be extra workload that they don't have staff for. And then, yeah, do a bit of research into the grants that you want to go for. Make sure they align with the organisation that you are partnering with, and that it's not stepping on their funding toes as well. Yeah, and Oh, where did I get to? Yeah. So also, if you do get rejected from an organization or from a grant application, don't be scared. Try again. I think there's a sort of joke in the access sector that we get 1 out of 10 every applications that we put in, and unfortunately, that's the nature of funding. But that, as I said before, there are many, many different places that we as an umbrella organization can apply to. And it's just about constantly submitting the applications, tailoring them, asking for feedback, maybe on why you didn't get them, asking for advice from the funders themselves. As an example, Department of Internal Affairs have funding advisors that you can contact and ask, for advice on the applications. Same with ethnic communities. And keep trying. And yeah.
Thank you, Kristen. Just we'll stop the screen share if we can.
Let me know if you have any questions.
Sounds good. Yes, please, if you have any questions for both Alana or Kristen, just type them in the chat. Just to kind of like go back, this webinar is more to kind of like provide more information. This is not an either or about these two options, because there are only two options out of a few others as well. I myself, even though I've been in the charity sector before like joining Huye, like having been in this role, it really opened my eyes on the difficulties it could be, especially for new groups. And knowing that unregistered groups, for example, are only allowed to apply for certain amounts. And if they want higher grants or higher funding, then they have to consider one of the registration options, which is either being a charity, which includes a lot of tasks, as both Kristen and Alana have mentioned, regarding signing up to a board, reporting, dealing with receipts, contracting, and all of that. But also then, if not, then what else is out there for you, and is either registering as a company or an incorporated society with a non-for-profit status, but then that limits you from other grants and other opportunities that might be open to you. So I'm just going to try and take it back to you, Alana. Why was the Gift Collective and Open Collective created, and what's like the goal of it, whether in New Zealand or abroad? And if you can tell us when it started in New Zealand too, just to give us a bit of context on that.
Sure. Well, Open Collective has been going for about 6 years, and it started overseas but by a very international team. And I've been working on it remotely from New Zealand since almost the beginning. So it's always had a bit of that Kiwi influence in there. And it started because there just is this gap, like the structures that we have in our world are really defined by old ways of thinking about things sometimes, like the legal entities, the way that the legal system understands entities, the way that the tax system understands entities, doesn't really match the much more free-flowing, flexible way that people can work these days. And we see really powerful movements coming where it's an amazing movement that's achieving a lot, but they don't necessarily have a very formal structure. And that's partly because of technology and partly just changes in society and making that way of communicating easier. So it was created because of that gap. And we saw it in lots of different places. It's community groups, things like meetup groups, open source software projects is another one, social movements. These are all things where it's a real thing. People are doing this thing together, but nobody really owns it. And it would be maybe weird if one person owned the whole thing or became the director, or it's just not a good fit for the traditional legal structures. So that's why it was created, and basically combining the legal solutions that need to be there in terms of having umbrella organizations that can serve different communities with the technology of the software platform that can manage lots of transactions. And we can do, thousands of tiny transactions is fine because it's mostly automated on our side. Whereas I think if you, a traditional fund holding organization, you would expect it to be maybe one major grant, and then that makes it feasible for them. They can't do $1,010 crowdfunding contributions, but we can handle that sort of thing. So it's kind of just filling a particular niche. We started here in Aotearoa over a year ago. So I guess at the end of 2020. So I have been a trustee of the Gift Trust for some time, and I really just felt like it was a great fit for the Gift Trust, because the Gift Trust, the other thing that they do is support donors to give their money, make donations, make grants. And so the gift collective is a little bit the inverse of that, which is supporting projects who are receiving funding, which I thought it would be a great fit. And so we formed this partnership and launched the gift collective, a bit over a year ago. And the reason we did it, it's because I think fund holding is really underdeveloped here in Aotearoa. It's not something that a lot of people know about, but it's something that a lot of people need. And people reach that moment where they're like, oh, we could probably get this grant, but where would we put the money? Or we can't tick this box, or wait, do I receive this crowdfunding into my personal bank account and pay income tax on it? And just like, it's not till that moment that people really feel this need, but the need is definitely there. So I really want to spread knowledge of fund holding, not necessarily just with us, but with everybody who's offering to be an umbrella organization, and just so people know this is an option. A lot of people do default to registering their own charity, and it is comparatively easier to do that in New Zealand than in some other countries, but that also actually like paradoxically creates a problem where it's like, okay, it's kind of easy to register and you get started and you think you can handle it, but then actually turns into quite a lot of work, and you have to understand a lot about, you know, what tier reporting am I doing, and just all the stuff that you probably don't want to be spending your time doing. And I just feel like if we can share resources and infrastructure, then we can all have more capacity for what's really important, which is the work in communities.
Thank you for that, Alana. And I think it gives us kind of like a bit of context. And I do have a few other questions. But for now, we'll just go to Kristen, because you've talked about it briefly, but I just wanted to kind of like ask you for more details. You mentioned how do groups find the right umbrella organization? And I think this kind of comes back to having that mutual benefit of what if, I think for you and Voice of Aotearoa to work together because it's in the same field and it kind of worked out. But then what if there's an umbrella organization that's doing some great work in one area, but then a group approaches them that want them to be their fund holder, but they're working in a different area? Do you think there could be still a mutual benefit, or is that one of the key things you'll advise, is to find someone who's doing something similar to what your organization's mahi is all about?
I think that possibly depends more on the fund itself. So for example, we would happily apply for events funding for a cultural group to put an event on, even though we're a radio station as opposed to an events management organization, as long as the outcomes are what actually align. So for us, that would be cultural representation. And again, part of what we will be applying for Voice of Aotearoa will be to enable their activities outside of the radio station. So I think as long as your core values are really aligned and what you care about is really aligned, then that can be a really beautiful fit. It's just about illustrating that to the umbrella organization, because I know we're not actually approached that often by people who aren't program makers, for example. It's usually quite specific to what we're doing that they want us to be the umbrella organization for, but we would definitely consider things outside of that. So I think, again, it goes back to not being scared to knock on doors. I mean, if you have a look in Wellington, Community Networks Wellington has a great community finder page where there's a lot of groups there. You could have a look through there if this is the region that you're in, or similar ones for other regions, and look at the places that are registered at their core purposes, their aims, what they're looking to achieve, because often they're going to align in the community sector, not the activity specifically, but the need that you meet, I suppose. Yeah. So I think definitely don't be scared to ask.
Thank you. And then one just follow-up question to you, Kristen, and then same question for you, Alana, like that Rania asked. Have either of you come across any barriers applying to the same funders multiple times with different projects or groups, or do they recognize now that you're a fund holder?
We have Wellington City Council, and I don't want to single them out in a bad way. They've been incredibly generous to us, but we did find when we applied for multiple different radio shows, they kind of saw it as, well, you're double dipping a little bit. So we've actually ended up where a few of our cultural groups have personally applied themselves because they are registered, and they've had more success in getting multiple grants across that. I think it's partly because they don't want to be seen to be favouring an organisation. They don't necessarily have the capacity themselves to illustrate that they were funding a fund holder, which is where, of course, a fund holding organisation comes in so handy in this kind of area, because if a cursory glance at it could just look like, oh, Wellington Access Radio gets all the money. So that's really been the only issue, but there are other things where they are aware that we're applying on behalf of groups and that the benefit is going specifically to those groups and not specifically to us.
Yeah, we are aware of this challenge. We haven't hit up against it too badly ourselves, but it's definitely been noted by funders. And it's sometimes it comes down to just, it sounds trivial, but like in their system for managing grants, they have like, you know, that you have to pick the organization, and that, you know, has implications for how the grant is seen, or if a grant to that organization doesn't do its reporting properly, then the whole organization would be blacklisted or refused for future grants. And then for a fund holder, yeah, that would be a really big problem, because, you know, obviously we're an umbrella organization for lots of different projects. But at the same time, we have had really good discussions with funders and government that they're interested in solving this problem or working with this problem. So we've been talking to DIA, and they are working on a fund holding policy internally so that they can better interface with fund holders for all of their grant funding. And so I think that's kind of what I was talking about it being more of a systemic thing, that I want fund holding to be better understood, for us as a society to better mature how we deal with it. And that really includes funders. There are a few very old-fashioned funders who just straight up will not fund fund-holded projects. Like, that's their policy. And so I don't know, maybe we can shift their thinking, but for now, I'm really just interested in working with those funders who do get it. Yeah, I'm kind of up for the technical or operational challenges of like, how does it work in your system? I feel like those must be solvable with a little bit of work. But I think it's important, because it's not good for anyone if we have lots of tons of little entities that we don't all need to be separate and stuff like that. And it's not great for the funder either. Like, it's more efficient for them, and they want more money getting to the actual endpoint in communities, not going to overheads as well. So hopefully we can work together on that.
Thank you both. And before we go to the other questions here, Pania, do you mind just jumping in if you have a second to tell us more about the te rungas you mentioned?
Kia ora, everybody. I haven't been in New Zealand very long, so I'm still learning, but I know the rungas up here in the far north were created as fund holders. So when they were created 15, 20 years ago, it was an organisation very similar to what you're talking about, where they were recognised by the government as our fund holders for our fisheries money. But what happened was that all of that money got soaked up in administration, and the actual marais and the people that it was supposed to represent, like the first year, there was $100,000 given from the fisheries money, and the marais were offered $2,000. So that's one of the biggest reasons that the people up here don't ask for funding, because they don't trust you guys, pretty simply.
Yeah, that's really understandable why that would damage trust a lot. Yeah, I don't know too much about what happened in that specific situation, but obviously trust is a very important thing, and we do have Aotearoa with people who are thinking about coming under our umbrella about that. Like, how can we trust what's going to happen to the money? The way that we handle it with our system is through total transparency. So you can see exactly. So the money comes in, we take out our fee. So our fee is upfront, it's 8%. That's known by everybody from the beginning to cover those overheads. So we take out our 8%, and you can see that on the platform. Okay, 8% has been taken out. And then the rest of the money goes into their account in the system, and that is under the control of the project leaders. So they are the ones who decide where that money is spent, and when people want to spend that money, they submit their invoice to that page, and the first step is that the project leaders approve it, and if they approve it, then it comes to us and we just check it for compliance purposes, like ensuring that it's allowable under charities regulations and that sort of thing, ensuring that the receipt is valid and that kind of thing. And if that's all in order, then we pay it. So that's kind of the way we are dealing with some of those trust issues, is to really proactively put control of the money with the people that it's meant to be with, and it's not with us. I think that's sort of a problem that more traditional fund holders can get into. And a lot of times it's not, you know, evil or whatever. It's literally just they don't have a system for showing the money. It's sitting on a spreadsheet on somebody's computer in the back office and not accessible, or they can't just give everybody access to see the actual bank account. So they don't really know how to do that. But if, yeah, our system is transparent. So that's helpful. But also it's just down to actual relationships. I mean, trust is built on real whakapapa and relationships. And I hope that a combination of sort of the technology side and the system side, plus the really human side, can get us to a different place with trust for fund holding.
Thank you for that, Alana, and thank you for the context, Pania. And I think it kind of like goes into a question we're going to ask both of you, and it's maybe Kristen first. Would you recommend that they sign an MOU? Because obviously some organizations, and I think it goes both ways, where some organizations will incur a lot of costs like administration and just having to allocate someone else to deal with the receipts and reporting and all of it, while as some organizations might just come to a misagreement or misunderstanding, and then that was all lost.
I definitely think having an agreement that sets out expectations is very important. It is part of my job to do all of the funding resolutions at this organization anyway, and that's my contribution to that community for me to take care of that. So they have to compile everything, but I'll submit it. We don't take any cut for that. I'm aware other organizations may need to, but you don't want to end up in a situation where the relationship goes sour because there hasn't been a clear agreement in the first place. And I think that's in terms of the division of funds, how they will be paid, even just simple things like whether there's GST or not, when the receipts are due by, these kind of things, ensuring that the project is delivered on the correct date. And just making sure that the division of responsibilities is mapped out, any obligations are covered in the first place, that no unrealistic expectations are set either, because I'm aware myself that I can say, oh, I want to do this for someone, and I may not actually have the time to do it. So being realistic about everything, and then everyone just working to sort of the best of their abilities to do it well and have open and honest dialogue if any problems do arise, because I think it's not having that conversation that can create problems. But yeah, an MOU is probably a really sensible way to do that. Some groups get a little freaked out about contracts though. They're like, I just wanted to do this really nice thing and you're slamming paperwork on me. So, you know, describing it and writing it in a way that actually is communicating effectively with the people you work with is really important as well, I think.
Yeah, and thank you, Kristen. And I think that memorandum of understanding, just kind of like lining things down and writing them down as to what the expectations are when they need to be met, kind of like safeguards everyone while maintaining that trust and healthy relationship and just community work. I guess, Alana, might not apply to you because everything is transparent and online. So if you don't mind explaining it to us, the breakdown of the fees and what's the fees used for, is Open Collective then using whatever proceeds from that to expand and help other communities, or is it just to cover administration costs? And following question is, when would you just say no to an organization and maybe advise them to set up as their own charity or look for other options?
Yeah, I would just really briefly on the MOU, I would say yes, definitely. So like we have a standard one that you can see before you sign up, and it's, you know, explained in plain English and stuff. I'm also part of a working group which is trying to publish a white paper about fund holding. It's like a group of lawyers and accountants basically, and charity sector people, and they want to do a template MOU that organizations can use, because they identified that it's not very effective to have everyone having to make this up from scratch every time. But it's really hard. It's really hard to get the generalities right, because actually different situations are different. And then, yeah, an issue like GST, I don't want to tell you how confusing that can get, but I'm still going to be pushing for us to try to publish that white paper and publish that draft MOU, because it can be used and, you know, be helpful to people. So our fees, yes, so 8% is our fees. And as I say, it's transparent, you can see, and it's not only transparent that you can see it's been taken out of your budget, but you can follow it into our transparent budget and see exactly how much fees we're getting and exactly what we're spending it on, in real time, so people can see. And my goal with fees is that it feels not like a tax that's being taken from you, but like an investment into this commons, that this mutual infrastructure that's actually giving back more to you. That's the goal. And I hope that we help people feel that way. So yeah, overheads are real. Like, we are, as a charity, we have to get audited and we have to do a bunch of admin, and we process all the payments and all the compliance checking and running the website and all this kind of stuff. But I hope, I think it's not going to be long before we have enough surplus to be thinking a little bit more deeply about how we reinvest that money back in to serve our community as a whole. And I've got ideas for that. One area is like communications channels and stuff like that, so that when one of our groups is doing a fundraising campaign, we have really great channels to share it with and to boost, their voice. I would love to be able to fund grant writing assistance for our groups, which we don't currently do, but I would love to do that. And we've talked with other organizations to do that, about partnerships. I would love to, I think it would be a natural fit for kind of like an incubator type thing, where you have sort of wraparound support around projects. We're not quite there yet, but these are the kind of things that I hope to do in the future. And these are the kind of things we're doing in the larger entities that I'm involved with overseas. And so, because of the transparency and because of the, obviously we're a not-for-profit entity and stuff like that, all of the money is getting reinvested into the community. But I think ultimately, I hope that the projects can tell us what they really want. And I'd love to work towards sort of more participatory process in the projects, articulating, where should we invest, or what kind of help or assistance do they most want.
Thank you for that, Alana. Any questions from our guests? You can put the hand up or type it. You can give like a 1 minute grace period. Trying to see if I can change my view so I can actually see all. Yes. Got one from Rochelle. How would the group find an umbrella organization? Kristen, maybe like that one is for you. Like, do you go looking for groups that you want to host, or what do you think the process is like?
So I think that so I mentioned before, in the Wellington region, there's a really great organization called Community Networks Wellington. And they have an organization finder on their website. So you can have a tootle through, and it's got cultural organizations, I believe, sporting organizations, community stuff. There's some creative things. There's a lot of different places on there, and it's both their members and non-members. So that's one place here locally that's good. They're actually under the umbrella Community Networks Aotearoa, which is the national organization. So I know they have offices across the country. And I think that that's a really good place to start. And it's going to take a little bit of research, because you'll then have to have a little bit of a look about, are they registered themselves and that kind of thing. But I think also just Googling around to find places that align with you, asking, going out and connecting with your community, going to community events and having a chat. But another really great idea is, if you found a fund that you think looks really interesting, look at who has been a recipient of that fund in the past, because you could potentially partner with that organization and go in to sort of co-run a project with them. Or you could say to them, get the money in and I'll do the project for you because I want to do it. There's so many different permutations of how that can work, but a lot of it really is about that community networking. You can also look through member organizations of Volunteer Wellington, because the majority of those are registered organizations. And that, again, is under the umbrella of Volunteering New Zealand, with lots of regional offices. So I'd say those are really good places to start. But of course, at first, if you're really defining, there's a project that you are incredibly excited about that you want to get funded, you would hope that you had aligned yourself or that you were familiar with that terrain. Because if you're not aware of the organizations who are already in that playing field, you're not sure if you're about to invest work to double up on something they're already doing. So your investigative approach that you take might actually reveal that that's happening already and that you could maybe volunteer with that project. So yeah, it's all good. It's just covering the cultural landscape of what's happening in your arena.
I think that right now, if you Google like fund holder or something, you won't get very far, or umbrella organization, because it isn't that developed here. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start Gift Collective, to kind of serve those people who don't have those connections. Like, I think if you have connections with an organization with experience of what you want to be working on, and who can, like what Kristen said about, I'm sure that they can give all kinds of incredible specialized advice for the kinds of projects that they support, and the connections with funders and everything, like that is gold. Like if you have that, amazing, take that opportunity. But a lot of times people can't necessarily find an organization who's working in their area and is willing to do fund holding, because not every organization is set up for it. Not everyone will take on the overhead. And sometimes they want to, like, I've heard stories of people getting charged like 30% or something from the fund holder. And yeah, so it's just, yeah. So this is why we started Gift Collective, as an intentionally broad based, like we can take almost any charitable purpose in New Zealand. But on the flip side, we don't provide that super specific, like sector specific support for projects in a specific area. So I just think we really need both. I think we need the kinds of fund holders with deep expertise, and we also need a kind of really broad fund holder to catch those people when they don't really know where to go.
It had to happen once, but I speak while I'm on mute. No, thanks, Alana, for that. And I think, yeah, I think the following question kind of will maybe allow you both to expand on, because I know, Alana, for the Gift Collective, the organization needs to pass a criteria that ensures that they meet the charitable status. Kristen, does that, like, do you have to go through that as well? And then maybe back to you, Alana, like after Kristen, what do you do with groups that don't necessarily meet the charitable status criteria but are non-for-profit? We'll start with you, Kristen, maybe.
It would depend if their objectives align with ours, because I mean, we are regarded as having a charitable purpose. So kind of anything that we foray into that reflects our values is under that. But it doesn't have to meet such a high bar that charities would actually consider that group or that project a charity in and of itself. So I think for us, it's just really about, well, like we don't have a specific checklist. It's more that through having a conversation with the group, we really look at what is the outcome going to be? What is the benefit going to be? Can you achieve it? Is this actually needed? Has the community asked for this, or is someone just going, oh, I think that's a good idea, without really doing any research? So there's quite a lot that we put into our consideration process, but it's very much a case-by-case basis. We don't have a specific template. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, for the Gift Collective, our application process, sorry, yelling downstairs. Our application process is designed to be super lightweight, and we have a application form on our website, but it's not super heavy, because we're able to do kind of compliance checks and everything that we need to do on a rolling basis as the money's getting used. So our criteria for joining are pretty simple. It has to have a charitable purpose that's allowed under the law. It has to be for public benefit. It has to be focused on New Zealand, a few criteria like that. But there are projects that easily go outside of that. So for example, if you want to do a crowdfunding campaign for the benefit of an individual, maybe somebody who's in distress or something like that, or needs help, that really doesn't qualify under charities regulations. Also, if you want to do stuff that includes overseas connections, that one's a little bit tricky. And also just, yeah, if you don't basically want all the restrictions of a charity, sometimes it's not the best choice. So I usually say to people, like, what do your funders care about? If you're going for grant funding that requires a registered charitable trust, you should definitely sign up with the Gift Collective. Or if your donors really want that donation tax credit, or it's really important for your credibility. But if not, so we have this other option, which is under Open Collective New Zealand, which is a not-for-profit company. It's also a not-for-profit, but it's not a registered charity. And it just has like a lot more flexibility because it doesn't have the restrictions of charities regulations. It has lower fees. It's basically kind of a lighter weight version of oversight that we have to do on that side. So we do have those two options. And I've had interesting conversations with people on which side they want to fall on, and questions like, okay, is fundraising for a hapu you know, is that public benefit? And then, you know, there's some really interesting questions that come up, and that's why it's amazing to have Cheryl as a partner, because she's very expert in exactly where that line is with what's allowed to be under charitable trust.
Thank you, Lana. Yes, we'll be sharing, so this kind of brings us to a wrap. We'll be sharing the recording of this webinar, any PowerPoints that have been shared, details about the upcoming webinars, which I'll mention now too, and a survey link, all in an email tomorrow, just so you can get all of the information that has been shared here today. In terms of upcoming webinars, we've got the next Wednesday and the one after, which is the last two webinars of our summer series. We'll be talking about the first one, which is next week, is struggling to report to your funder, and we'll talk about that and explore it more. And the last one would be how to start delivering funded community service for government. We do these on a seasonal basis, so this will mark the last two of the summer series, but we keep trying to get as many informative webinars to all of you. So please, in the survey, if there's a topic that you really want to know more about, tell us, and we'll try and do that in our next season of the webinars. For now, this has been great. Thank you both for joining us, Kristen and Alana. This gives us a very good insight on some of the options as to the alternatives of registering as a charity, or just doing your mahi and continuing with the positive impact that a lot of the community groups we work with know that do, and struggle with that just last step of becoming recognized or becoming a legal entity, I think. As I've mentioned, we'll close up here with karakia. We'll stop the recording, but we'll stay for another 30 minutes. So please join us. This is an informal space where you can just give us an update about how you're going, how your organization is going. If you have any questions to Huye or anyone else in the room, it could just be a nice way for us to chat. Rania.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Kia ora koutou katoa. I'll just take the spotlights off everybody. Just wanted to echo what Saka was saying. Thank you so much, everybody, for your contributions today and your great kōrero, Kristen and Alana. Thank you, Saka, for great facilitation. It was really interesting to see the questions come through and have your responses. So we'll finish off with a karakia whakamutuna. Kua mutua mātou mahi, mo tēnei wā, manakitia mai mātou katoa, o mātou hua, o mātou whānau, ai au ki te aorangi. Kia ora koutou katoa.